Yeah. Yeah. If I'm on screen there, then I'm on screen at home as well. So, hello everybody. It is 3:30, which means it is time for one of our afternoon STEM shows here at the Headwaters Science Center. These are shows that we do most days of the week. We're currently doing them between 4 and 5 days a week, depending on who happens to be working on a given day. So keep tuning in at 3:30 and we'll probably be doing something on here. But today we've got a couple of topics we want to talk about. My show, usually that I do on Fridays, is usually a follow-up show. So every Wednesday, if you tune in, our executive director, Lee, usually we'll be reading a book of some description, some kind of kid's book that has something to do with some kind of science-y related topic. And so usually what I do is I do the show the Friday after that Wednesday and kind of talk about some of the stuff that gets talked about in the book. And so this week, the book Lee read was called Pangolina. And so it's a story about a young pangolin who, is raised by its pangolin mother, and then eventually, once it gets out on its own, pretty shortly thereafter, gets captured, and somebody tries to traffic this pangolin for unknown, but presumably somewhat nefarious purposes. And so what I think I want to talk about today is a little bit about the exotic animal trade, animal trafficking, that kind of stuff. And then while we're doing this, we're going to talk a little bit about our boa as well. We have our largest boa here, Artemis, is getting ready to come into a shed. And a lot of times when that's happening, it's helpful to do a little bit of a soak, a little bit of a bath that helps him out. And I figure it's appropriate since boas are a species that, not so much anymore, but in the past has been trafficked quite a bit. So, Angie's holding our boa just off screen here, so if we want to come in, we'll get her in our tub of water here. Yep. And so generally, ideally what we want is warm, dechlorinated water. Unfortunately, getting warm, dechlorinated water can be kind of a challenge around here in this quantity. And so, given my choice, I will typically opt for dechlorinated water. So this is just tap water that's in here, but it's tap water that's been sitting out for 24 hours. And so this is tap water that is room temperature, which is generally a little chillier than what you would like for this type of thing. But it's not going to be a problem for her for the amount of time that we're going to have her soaking in here. And like I said, we're doing this soak for the sake of she has a shed coming up. And soaking in water is a good way to facilitate that shed going smoothly. And she generally is a pretty good shedder, but like I said, just a little help goes a long way a lot of the time. And she usually will fight a little bit as far as wanting to stay in the water at first, but eventually she settles in and just kind of hangs out. We've done this with her for most of the last several sheds she's done. But anyway, Artemis here is a common boa or red-tailed boa, Columbian boa. It's all different names for the same snake. And like I said, kind of the through line we're talking about here as far as connecting it to our book that we read on Wednesday is talking a little bit about the exotic pet trade and kind of animal trafficking that goes along with that. And so it's something that's kind of interesting to think about is like the animals we have as pets, weren't always necessarily super common to be kept as pets. And there's usually a phase there where it's an animal that is more common in the wild than it is necessarily in our homes. And like I said, any animal has to go through that before it really winds up getting to that super common pet level. And like I said, we're to a phase with boas now where they are much more common bred domestically than they are just captured out of the wild. But even go back just a couple decades, and a lot of the boas that people had were ones that were caught out in the wild and brought into homes that way. And there's a number of animals to this day that are kind of more commonly done that way. Parrots are kind of notorious for this too. A lot of parrots that you'll see, especially the kind of more expensive exotic parrots, are actually wild-born ones that people just snag out of the wild and bring in. A great example that has very recently become quite popular in the pet trade and is still very much in this phase where pretty much anyone you see is going to be one that was illegally captured out of the wild are slow lorises. So I have puppet behind me there. That is one that we sell in our gift shop. But, you know, you look in a gift shop kind of magazine, like what we buy our gift shop merchandise from 10 years ago, and there's no shop that's a slow loris in there because no one's ever heard of that animal. But slow lorises are something that over the last, like I said, about decade, have become very, very popular in the pet trade, relatively speaking, as a result of basically viral videos about them. You know, the one that most people have seen, it's one where the loris like has its arms up like this and the owner is tickling it on the sides. And, you know, you look at the comments under that YouTube video and it's a bunch of people being like, oh, it's so cute, I want it as a pet. And lo and behold, you can trace the records on this. Since 2009, slow lorises getting captured and trafficked out of the wild has gone up like thousands of %. Like slow lorises are almost extinct in the wild now because so many of them just get picked out of the wild and brought like to be sold as exotic pets, and they're protected everywhere. Every slow loris that somebody has a pet was illegal at some point. You know, even if it's not illegal to buy them as an owner, it's illegal to harvest them everywhere where they exist. Got a question?
Yeah. So I have heard that the tickling of the armpit of a slow loris is probably not a great idea because isn't it poisonous?
Yeah. So the arm sticking up posture, like so, a lot of people associate with being very cute with like the loris kind of enjoying being pet or tickled or scratched in that way. But slow lorises are the only venomous mammal. Or the only venomous primate, sorry, not the only venomous mammal. And so what they're doing when they stick their arms up like that is they have little venom glands in their elbows. And so, you know, your loris that you're seeing in that video is in a defensive posture. It's saying, like, leave me alone, I don't want to be here. So even, like, the cute video that people kind of very much associated with one is one where the loris in that video is distressed. And that is another thing that makes this exotic pet trade really harmful, is a lot of people don't know how to care for them. And it can be hard, even if you do know how to care for them, to like be able to do it appropriately. Finding slow loris food is hard. You know, you can't just go to the pet store and buy a bag of slow loris food. It isn't a thing that any pet store is going to be selling like you can with, you know, a bag of dog food or whatever. And that's true for a lot of stuff. I mean, we have a number of animals here that, you know, would be considered exotic pets. We have a number here that are, you know, again, go back a couple decades and we're in a very similar boat to something like the slow lorises, where they were pretty much all just being taken out of the wild. Like I mentioned, the parrots, a lot of the snakes are that way. Ball pythons are still that way in a lot of the world. There's a breeding trade for ball pythons now, like they're relatively easy to breed, so it's getting better on that front. But depending on where you are in the world buying a ball python, it's very possible that the ball python you're getting is one that was illegally harvested in Western Africa somewhere. And it's hard to know a lot of the numbers on that because a lot of these animals are coming from places in the world where documentation is not super, super great. But we know it happens because, you know, they get caught up in ports, you know, being illegally imported and all that. It happens quite a bit. Like I said, exact hard numbers are tough to come by, though. Keep going. But as far as kind of, like I said, implications about it on top of that, like I said, care challenges are hard. Even just like the movement of animals in that way presents a lot of issues too. And snakes are one great example that is, again, getting a lot of publicity right now, are all of the various species of exotic snake that are now loose in different parts of the world. You hear about it all the time in the Everglades, where people are like, oh, there's Burmese pythons out there, there's ball pythons out there, there's boas out there that should not be there. And I said almost all of those animals are there by virtue of the pet trade. It's how they end up there. People get them as pets, and then they either get too big or they escape on their own, and then they get out in the wild and they keep surviving there. I was looking at some study about snakes in the Everglades not too long ago, and it was a like highway like wildlife observation study. They like had set up like trail cams like along a highway, and they said that compared to I think 1999, I think it was between 1999 and 2019, the number of raccoons they spotted on their trail cam dropped by like 99+% in these areas where Burmese pythons were known to be loose. So the raccoons fell way off, the bobcats fell way off, the rabbits pretty much quit existing. And so you're seeing like the broader reaching implications of these animals getting released there, and like that's exactly what a Burmese python wants to eat, is, you know, a mammal that's the size of a raccoon or a cat or a dog or whatever. That's what they're going for. Oh, come on. And so there's implications beyond just like the health of that animal in the wild. You know, they, especially if they're getting out, they're going to have implications for whatever area they get loose in. You're fighting more than usual. But usually she tries to kind of struggle out of the water for a little while and then kind of just accepts her fate and hangs out. But there you go. And boas are very avid swimmers. They're very good swimmers. They spend a lot of the time in the water in the wild. And so this isn't like shocking for her to just like be in water. Like I said, the water's probably chillier than what she would prefer. But this isn't something that she's like completely out of her element in, having her sitting in a tub of what, 6-inch, 5-inch deep water. Yeah, maybe we're settling in now. And like I said, the soaking helps with the shed, and Artemis is an adult snake. She is like 15 or 16 years old right now, which for a boa, like I said, is not old by any means, but it's definitely a mature adult snake. And so at her age, she should probably be shedding somewhere in the neighborhood of like 4-ish times a year, give or take. She lately has been shedding more than that, and a big part of the reason for that, and maybe you guys have spotted this, and I know we've talked about it on camera a couple times with her, is you might see these spots she has on her back. And she had a little run-in with a heat lamp a couple of years ago, and so she's still been working her way through those burns that she got from her heat lamp. And it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about because, you know, the worst of those burns were second-degree burns. They had blisters on them. And, you know, you think about like a human, if you get a second-degree burn, you know, you grab a hot pan or something and get burned on your hand. It's something that, you know, is over and done in like, you know, a few weeks for us at the most. Like, you wouldn't know it's there. But for her, like I said, this has been over 2 years at this point since that happened to her. And, you know, you're still seeing noticeable scarring on there. And that's not necessarily going to be there forever, though. She is still healing. It's not like that is necessarily a permanent injury for her. But what's tricky for snakes is that they really can't heal just like a single spot on their skin. If they're going to heal like at all, they have to shed their whole skin. And so that's really metabolically intensive, especially when you're a snake that's this big, because you have to, you know, regrow a whole skin and shed it for the healing to happen at all. And so she's kind of shedding pretty much as often as she can, which comes out to, like I said, maybe every 3 months or so. She's been shedding for, like I said, the last 2 years basically. And so she's been eating quite a bit. And like I said, that's just her like taking in calories for the sake of being able to shed more often, basically. So, like I said, she's shedding a little more often than what she probably would normally be, but that's just part of the healing process for her, and that's her doing the normal thing that she needs to do to get over an injury like that. Anybody have any questions about anything? Comments? Concerns? No, so one of the things that happens with snakes when they are getting ready to shed is their skin gets kind of cloudy. Basically what happens is the old skin starts to separate away from the new skin, and as part of that process, when they're preparing to shed, they basically flood their whole system with lymphatic fluid. It's kind of a disinfectant type of thing that they do to make sure they're not, you know, gonna get sick during the transition between skin. And what happens is snakes don't have any eyelids, and so they actually shed a layer off their eyeball as well. And so what happens is you'll see their eyes get very cloudy as well. And so she can't see very well right now. And boas, you know, snakes don't have great vision, but as far as snakes go, boas are probably about as good as you can get as far as snake vision goes. But she can't see right now, and as a result of not being able to see, a lot of the times they're a little bit more defensive, they're a little bit more unpredictable during this time. So you'll see this if you come and visit, and when any of our snakes are like deep into a shed, there will be a sign up on their tag that says, "Sorry, I can't come out today because I'm shedding or approaching a shed." And that's why, just because they're a little bit less predictable during that time. You know, this type of handling, like I'm okay putting myself in this position where if she lashes out at me, like I know what's gonna happen. Like I know how to handle that. But when it comes to guests, we don't do that. But we do have plenty of other snakes out on the exhibit floor that are able to be brought out. We have 4 other snakes, and as far as I know, all the rest of them are good to come out right now. Otherwise, if we don't have any other questions, I can wrap up here on the stream, and we can maybe do a little chit-chatting off a camera here too. So thank you guys for watching. Headwaters Science Center is open 7 days a week. We are open from 9 to 5:30 Monday through Saturday. We are open from, 9:30 to 5 Monday through Saturday, 1 to 5 on Sundays. So swing by on any of those days. We oftentimes will be doing one of these shows. If you come by at 3:30, you can sometimes find us, and we're usually happy to have a live audience, people to ask questions to, or ask questions of us to, bounce information off of. Makes it a little more engaging for us and sometimes for the audience as well. So we're always happy to have that. But like I said, if you swing by at 3:30, take a peek around, see if you can find us doing one of these shows and participate if that sounds interesting to you. But otherwise, tomorrow, Saturday, we may or may not be doing a show tomorrow. We don't officially have one scheduled, but I know Carl, one of the educators here, loves to do a Saturday show, even if it's not officially one that's on the schedule. So he might be live tomorrow.
Giant ground sloths.
Sounds like Carl's got one planned about giant ground sloths tomorrow. So if that sounds interesting to you, tune in for that at 3:30. But otherwise, we seeing you probably, let's see, I'm probably